Kamala Harris's sister has been lobbying to have her husband, who was at one point a U.S. attorney,
And
or at
he's
least
now
a deputy U.S. attorney, and
the
then
chief legal officer for
general
Uber.
counsel for Uber.
Yeah, in the middle of this Prop 22 insanity.
Yeah.
So he is as anti-worker as it gets, married to Maya Harris, who is very dubious in terms of like, I don't think Kamala Harris's primary presidential camp really liked her very much. And there was discussions about her role being outsized and her influence being way too felt. I mean, there were articles on this for sure. And she's now apparently putting her nose into the attorney general discussion for the Biden team and is trying to push her own husband onto there. And so what I'm trying to point out with this story, though, is Harris is going to run in 2024. I do think that this is another look at how the Harris orbit behaves that should be very troubling. One, this completely flies in the face of all of the criticism and undercuts the criticism of the Trump administration and the nepotism there, right? And I don't think Wes is actually going to get through. I think this is someone in the Biden team leaking it to Politico so they can sabotage it, and I don't think he would be seriously considered anyway. But this is how they are operating, people in the Kamala Harris orbit, and that should be troubling because this doesn't play well with voters, and Harris wants to be president in 2024.
I have a slightly different take that maybe the way the Harris orbit is operating, maybe what we're seeing is not the way that the Harris orbit operates. Maybe what we're seeing is a fight within the Harris orbit for how they will operate.
That's
right.
That's
I mean, I don't know. Like, you see these Politico stories and all that you're seeing the shadow of something, right?
Yes.
Like you don't know exactly why this story is there. You know that somebody has an agenda for it. If it is going to be one that sort of like that pushes Maya Harris out of that orbit a little bit in terms of influence, then I suspect, just to reverse engineer it, it is someone else who is in Kamala Harris's orbit who is trying to do that. And that's usually that's the way I read this, is that this isn't necessarily a snapshot of Kamala Harris's orbit. This could be a snapshot of a fight that's taking place in Kamala Harris's orbit.
Even, it doesn't necessarily have to be Kamala Harris's orbit. It could be
Biden's
orbit.
Biden.
It could be anybody's orbit, frankly. I mean,
right.
Politico will take anything you leak and barely fact check.
Right. But my point is that this is what we're seeing is something that has a dynamic to it. And it's not necessarily a snapshot of what's happening. It could be a snapshot of a fight that is in progress that we're just not privy to.
And the same one that I referenced, just really quickly, the same one I referenced earlier back in the primary season when people were saying, oh, Maya Harris is too involved in the campaign. Those could be the same people in the Kamala Harris orbit now speaking to Politico.
Exactly.
Don't forget, he's the head of the transition team. So I'm sure there's some frustration there. In my experience with her, to go back to the Unity Reform Commission, because I think it's really interesting because it set the stage for the presidential campaign. And there's only, other than Jen O'Malley Dillon and Hillary Clinton, there's only one person on that and Bernie Sanders, there's only one person who was a part of another campaign, and that was Maya Harris. Maya Harris was on the Unity Reform Commission, and she did not speak. She didn't even show up to many events until the last meeting. And there was a frustration from everybody across the table, Hillary people, Bernie people, Tom Perez people, that she suddenly was trying to flex her muscles and push us in certain directions. It was actual, no one ever wrote a story on this, but it's on the record. There was actual frustration. So it's like I'm having flashbacks to this moment where suddenly like she's not involved in anything and then she's trying to pull her weight. Maya Harris was a big fundraiser for Obama. Like her daughter was a national co-chair when I was a national co-chair for Obama in 2012. They've been pushing the Obama world for Kamala for a very long time. And I think, that when you have people that are used to getting into circles because they're able to fundraise, I think sometimes there's that disconnect with the process, like how you can't just suddenly come in and say, well, I raised you millions of dollars, now give me this. Sometimes that works. But I think that's kind of her the thing that's really hard about her. She doesn't know in a different way than Kamala. I mean, Kamala's obviously in office, so she knows this, but I think she's just used to walking in and having her sister's name or her
Right.
husband's lobbying power, or the having the fact that she's raised millions of dollars for the Democratic Party and for previous candidates.
That's
and
right. That's
expecting
much
something in
easier
return.
to get that to feel like you're a VIP when the stakes are much lower. It's like one thing like,
That's right.
here we got you the nice table, here's your access and this and that. But wait, oh, you want to choose who's in the cabinet? Oh, that's I mean that
You were just
that
here
takes
for the pageant stuff and
right,
to give
and
us
that takes
money.
that ends up being like, sort of like, how do we finesse this? I know, let's put a story in there that basically Harris has to say to her sister, hey, you got to back off this. Like one of the things that I thought was just sort of like fascinating in the WikiLeaks emails was the story of how the Clinton campaign was trying to get Hillary to tell Bill Clinton not to go give a speech. I can't remember if it was like a Chase or is it JP Morgan Chase or like literally on the day or the day before she was announcing her candidacy. And they didn't want to go directly to him. And they were like, sort of like standoffish and going directly to her. And they were like, it would go around in circles. Like, who's going to tell her? She doesn't want to impact what he does. I mean, like just that conversation, you just like realize like, there's a perception. And I think you probably have, you have a better insight into this than most, Nomi, because you've run, but there's this perception of like that everybody on a campaign has total control of what goes on. And it's just a question of pressing a button and pulling a lever, as opposed to like, these are just sort of messy amalgamations of really weird personalities and people who have like, huge territorial questions. I mean, it's like, and because they're thrown together in such an ad hoc manner, you don't get the advantage of an institution that is pre-existing and people are added on. And if they don't fit in, then they get filtered out and this and that. And even in those type of like institutions or endeavors, it can be tumultuous. This is just sort of like, we're all coming together and, unlike my experiences in like a film production or something, in a film production, you have very, very rigid positions where everyone knows what the job is. So if you step out of a lane, the AD will come over and say, dude, you got a problem. You got to either do this or you go. Boom. There's not a lot of time carving out what people's roles are. In a film production, let's say, except for maybe at the top, it starts to get ambiguous if there's like producers who are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing or stuff like this.
Producers don't always have film experience or giving money to the project.
Giving money. And then there's even like, but like there's some ambiguity up there and that's where things sort of really can fall apart. But these campaigns, like, like a transition team, it's like, everybody just goes in immediately trying to carve out territory because, this is an endeavor. This is like, we're just putting a tent in the desert and we're just, rolling it up. It's like a circus, but we haven't been anywhere before. And we're not going anywhere in the future. It's just like whatever you can take control of, you take control over.
Little fiefdoms come together.
Exactly.
Don't forget, this isn't just Kamala's fiefdom or Biden's fiefdom, which seems to be drowned out at this point, like pushed out entirely. It's Hillary Clinton's, fiefdom that has been partly, and Obama's, inherited by Kamala Harris. I mean, I've said this in the beginning that I don't think this is as much about Biden's administration as is about, as Emma said, Kamala Harris's administration. Like, it just seems like the Clinton Obama orbit that has kind of taken over Kamala's world it's just all over the place here. And and Jen O'Malley Dillon is more of a Biden person, Obama person than she is a Kamala person. So maybe that's kind of where that weird dynamic plays out. But you're right, Sam. I mean, it's and not only that,
and I think that's a good thing. From a progressive standpoint, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good thing that there is not a pre-existing juggernaut that comes in because, it's like, I think the idea that that they're just sort of like a hodgepodge of different factions gives more of an opportunity for progressives, I think.
remember in Shattered, the book Shattered, hearing about the dynamics afterwards of the Clinton campaign, like, like Jen O'Malley Dillon. Okay, you have to read it. It's so good. But Jen O'Malley Dillon, strangely enough, was part of that. And she was kind of, because she was from the Obama, I mean, people still haven't gotten over the 2008 primary. The one thing they unify behind is that they hate us. But other than that, left to their own devices, there's still like weird personality. Adam Parkamenko is on the other side of Jen O'Malley Dillon, and then they were playing games, and it's a really great read. But it reminds me also, you said about WikiLeaks, like perfect example of how personalities, that Hillary Clinton had her favorites, and they were always these crazy people like Sidney Blumenthal or what's his name that there was a lot of Trump in the debate, but they were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and people were like, they didn't know how to deal with them.
Blumenthal was
go explore Libya.
I mean, there are some people who suggest that Blumenthal was out there really pushing some of the birther stuff, and I don't know. That's that's never been confirmed. That's one of the rumors that was out there. The Clinton people had they had a legacy operation. They had people who had been with them for years and years and years. And one of the problems is I think they were fiercely loyal. And so they would bring real incompetence along with them. Because they owed it to them, and that can sometimes be a problem. Somebody just reminds me on the IM party unity, my ass. I remember a lot of those Pumas. Oh, yeah. I used to get a lot of very, very angry emails, very, very angry emails. Let's go through some of this. This is pretty stunning.